seeing this, I just now added you. And so I'm kind of giving a little bit of groundwork about what my life was before, that led up to the conversation. Today's conversation is from ADHD brain, how to navigate jobs that aren't ADHD friendly. Okay. And so anyway, that couple left and new house parents came in, and they were the complete and total opposite of, yep, we're in there. They're a complete and total opposite of the family teachers I was with before. Family teachers I was with before were super regimented, super schedule oriented. This is how things work and everything else. Um, the couple I ended up with were the Kool-Aid house. Um, everything's kind of free and fun. One thing I got written up for, I remember that, I'll never forget this. I got written up because they wanted to have a post Thanksgiving food fight in the house. I didn't grow up like that, and I did not participate, and I kind of made it known that I didn't necessarily agree with that. And so it started out good, but there was a lot of tension there. And I started getting dinged for things like, yeah, I was too regimented, or they said I wasn't family style enough. And I went from being super regimented to no regiment, no consistency, and there was some incongruencies between the husband and wife. The husband was really super laid back. The wife was really strict, and so I got caught in the middle, and that was not a happy place for me. Okay. I got transferred out of that house and got put with a more experienced couple, and it was magic all over again. Um, I could run the house in my own way when they were gone. I was trusted to do things. They loved me because they didn't have to worry about when they were gone. They knew that they would come back to a house that was intact, and everything else. So, long story short, this was all night shift stuff. Like all, you know, I was working, pretty much 2 to 10 every single night. And that's a great life up until you have children. My daughter was born. And at that point, I said, I need to get out of this job because I want to spend my evenings with her, and my wife. And I wanted to kind of get a day shift job. And so, and plus, I had kind of gone in, out, and around with the, corporate ladder and stuff. One thing that happened to me that was crazy, and this one I actually still do carry a torch for. I still kind of do hold a grudge for it. Um, so I had I dropped out of college to start working. One, because my mom was sick, and I wanted to start paying my own bills. Okay, and so I dropped out of college to start working. And so I was in my senior year, like I was close to graduating, but I dropped out so that I could start working. So I went back to school while I was working at this childcare place. Um, I had walked across stage. I had done everything I needed to do. I took the classes, got on the graduation list, walked across stage, graduated, got the sleeve for where my diploma was, and they said your diploma's in the mail. Okay. In the process of that, since I figured my diploma was in the mail, I went ahead and applied for a job, which is basically like an internship, a program that allowed me to move up into management. Okay. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm in this program talking to them. And I was a good, they saw me as a good candidate, or whoop de whoop de woo, right? And I'm waiting for my diploma, and it's not coming. Like, what's happening? I'm waiting for my degree, and it's not coming. And so I finally called up to school, and they're like, yeah, we didn't accept your math class. Shit. All right. So what I had to do was I actually had to test out a math. So I went back to the people that were running the program and said, hey, you know what? The university called and said that there was a math class. They didn't accept my math credits. I have to test out a math. And what they heard was, this nigga's lying. He's a liar. And that got me, that was like my cross to bear for pretty much the rest of my career at that place. I was the liar. Even though I said this is what happened, it was a mix up with my credits, I still have to test out. And I explained, I walked across the stage, I thought I was done. I was just waiting for my degree to be in hand. And so anyway, and the way my anxiety was set up, like, I just didn't, I never really confronted them on that piece of it, in terms of how I was being treated after that. Because essentially, I didn't know that essentially blacklisted me from that management path. Essentially, I had to go outside to get back in. It was the craziest thing. And there's a specific reason why I don't work there anymore. That was like almost 20 years of my life that I work there. There's a very specific reason why I don't work there anymore. So, I took a job with the state doing case management. This is where we're getting into the ADHD thing. Now, at the time when I took this job, it was a different job. My job was to go in and evaluate the services that court place probation kids. I had to evaluate the services that they were receiving, and essentially make sure that they were adequate for what the court orders were asking for. I had to check in on their status and blah 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 blah. Make sure that the services were meeting the kids' needs and the family's needs, and provide feedback to the court and the case and the worker that assigned the services. I was called a service coordinator. Okay, so at the time, Nebraska took on the really stupid, it made the dumb decision to try to privatize like health and human services, privatize a lot of the DHHS stuff, which is working with probation kids, working with state wards, working with abuse and neglect kids. They tried to privatize that. And since they had the service coordinator role out there, they said, we're going to take all the state workers' jobs and fold them into your job description, and this is what you're going to do. So I went from just having oversight over the services and coordinating and making sure that everything was being done effectively, and basically auditing the programs and making sure that they were doing what they were supposed to do, and checking in on the kids. I went from that to being these kids' full-blown case manager with no training. And they took a job that was already difficult because you had to keep a track of a lot of stuff, and made it impossible. Now, this meant 16-hour work days. This meant you never have enough time to do everything that you need to do. It also meant that since they used us by proxy to essentially push out all the state workers, because the state workers had a union and they wanted to break up the union, they used us. So essentially, we were the most hated people, period. Like, they hated us. In their minds, we were the scabs, and we had no power over that piece of it. There was nothing we can do. We didn't have any say about it. They just said, okay, so we have all these service coordinators. Now you guys are state workers. You guys are responsible for taking care of all aspects of these kids. The only thing is, we have to keep a couple of state workers, because in the state constitution, a contractor cannot be the legal guardian of a kid that's a ward of the state, where a state worker could be. So 18-hour days, never feeling like you're doing enough. Since I was working with probation and juvenile probation kids, and high-level wards of the state who had been on the criminal side, they called it OJS and 3B. I was with the Office of Juvenile Services kids and the probation kids. And so what we were doing was spent most of my time out in the streets, finding out where my kids were, if they were skipping school, talking to the schools to make sure that the kids were doing what they're supposed to be doing, checking in with the parents. Like, we were constantly out in the field doing stuff. The abuse neglect kids, which were the little kids, essentially, they had their lives looked different. They were mostly paperwork. But then they would also have horrendous travel schedules. Like, if they had a kid that had 8 siblings and the siblings were in 8 different states, then every single month they had to go see every single one of those siblings. They had to get on a plane and go see them. It was awful. And so this is the job that tested my ADHD. This is a rambling thing. I'm sorry. But anyway, long story short. So I was knee deep in this job with no training. Trying my best to make this thing work. The threat of being fired loomed over me, and I was in a very, very dark place. And I, at the same time, my son had just been born, so I had 2 kids under the age of 2. My wife was struggling with, the aftermath of pregnancy, if you know what I mean. And I'm in a dark place because this job is actively making me want to go walk into traffic, and I am being very literal about that. I'm being super literal. Those that know me know what the story is behind that one. And I'm struggling because I'm like, there's something missing, like something's not connecting. And I sat down and I saw this special on PBS talking about, is it me, you, or the ADHD or something like that? You, me, or the ADHD. And they talked about all the symptoms that adults with ADHD have, and it connected me like, holy shit. So I went and talked to my mom. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, you've been diagnosed with ADHD. Like, we did that when you were a kid. But since you didn't really need it in school, which, spoiler alert, I did kind of need the diagnosis in school once I got up to junior high and high school. I just was able to gut through it. We never really did anything about it. And so I had lived my entire life up until that point. This is like I was in my early 30s at that point. I lived my entire life navigating with pretty severe inattentive ADHD. It was bad. And so I was supplementing at the time. I didn't know I was self-medicating, but I was. I was self-medicating with massive doses of caffeine, unhealthy doses of caffeine. I wasn't eating. I was just in a bad place. And so that's where I really learned, and so that was when I actually got my adult diagnosis, and I got on medication. I had actually fight to get help because the first doctor I saw thought I was drug seeking, and I was just seeking help. I didn't care if it was therapy, if it was medication or whatever. I was just looking for help. And it wasn't the resident, because I saw a resident, the psychiatric resident, and her attending sight unseen decided that this black guy is drug seeking. And they put me on all these real antidepressants and stuff like that, and really messed me up for about a month. I ended up changing providers, and found somebody who actually specialized in adult ADHD, and we started medication management. And it was like a new day had opened up. Like, I was able to lock in and focus on things that I needed to get done. I was able to try to get tasks done. Now, this entire time, I'm realizing, when I had the clarity of finally being on medication, I had the clarity of realizing, wait a minute, this job is impossible. I'm actually doing an impossible job. And that's where we're going to start our story. So I've been going for about 30 minutes giving you my backstory. So this is where we're going to get into the actual meat of the topic. I had to learn how to navigate a non-ADHD friendly job. Newly on medication. Wife was dealing with postpartum depression. I was dealing with some level of depression just because I felt like I was a complete and utter failure up until I got the help I needed. And so this is where we start. Okay. So how to thrive in a work environment that is not ADHD friendly. Now, here's the thing, y'all. And I know I'm not getting many comments. I've been back and forth on this. This is still a new setup for me. One of the things I need to kind of put out there into the universe, y'all. It wasn't necessarily a friendly environment. And that's why I said it's an unfriendly environment. Because when I said, yeah, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, the first thing I was like, well, you can't use that as an excuse. I was just making you aware that I'm on medication and I'm trying to learn how to adjust to my new life. And the first thing I get from the supervisor was it sounded like an excuse. So that set me off on the wrong path in the first place, and made me super cautious of that piece of it. By the way, the next live stream is going to be being a manager with ADHD, because that was the next piece of it. Okay. So I gave you the whole story. Okay. Here's the dynamic I was in. Okay. Why traditional jobs clash with ADHD brains. 1, it's going to be the rigid schedule. 2, it's going to be consistent task switching without clear prioritization. I literally sat down in my supervisor's cubicle and said, I need help. I don't know what's a priority here. I have all these tasks in front of me. Can you help me figure out what is the priority for me to keep this job? What is the most important thing? And she said all of it. When we talk about not getting help, that's what we're talking about. I was asking, okay, what are the things that are most important to drive outcomes? In my mind, it was attending court dates, keeping my kids out of trouble, and writing court reports. They had a whole nother raft of accountabilities, of things that I wasn't really in charge of, that I was also accountable for. It was crazy. The task switch, the rigid schedules. I actually am fine with rigid schedules. Like, that was my happy place, where I knew what I was supposed to be doing and when I was supposed to be doing it. Like, that was actually a happy place, and that's kind of where I'm like, I wonder if there's something else I probably need to be tested for. I like rigid schedules. I don't like when schedules get up where there's a lot of upheaval in schedules. I don't like that. It drives me insane. It actually, that's the thing that will make me have a freak out, if the schedule keeps getting changed too much. The task switching is hard for ADHD brains. It's painful to switch tasks, especially when it's something I'm hyper focused on. Like, if I'm hyper focused, or if I was hyper focused on writing a court report, the worst thing in the world was I had to switch to go deal with something else from a kid, or had to leave my office. It was crazy. It was a mixture of micromanagement and lack of autonomy. The micromanagement piece came in where I did the entire scramble up when my son was being born. Leading up to it, I had tried to make sure that all my case management stuff was in shape to actually pass off to somebody else. There was one case that there was some incomplete stuff that I didn't necessarily have the paperwork on right before I had to go to the hospital. I was in the hospital working on things and fielding calls from my supervisor during the delivery. It was such an egregious violation of my boundaries that if I knew better, I would have quit at that moment. When my son is being born, I'm sitting here dealing with work-related stuff. And I had told everybody where it was, and I even said, hey, this is the thing that's pending out there, and I'm still there dealing with work-related stuff. Like, she's calling me while I'm in the delivery room asking me case-related questions. I should have quit right there. But it was a mixture of micromanagement and that lack of autonomy. Well, it's kind of the same thing. Unrealistic expectations for memory and focus. Now, here's the thing. Hindsight is amazing. In hindsight, I was doing a job that was impossible. I literally watched one of my coworkers mentally be destroyed by this job, to the point where it was breaking down in tears. It was so ugly. It was so bad. It was so overwhelming that the job finally broke her. And I realized that I wasn't the only one that was in that position. She was a lot worse off than I was. It didn't have anything to do with ADHD. This job was just impossible. I attributed it to ADHD. And that is important to my story, because since I felt like I was getting the medication was helping, well, if I get more medication, if I up my doses, I can get more, it can help me more. And that's what I did. Because the medication wasn't giving me the outcomes I was looking for, which was make this impossible job possible. And because of that, I was like, okay, the medication isn't doing everything it needs to be doing. And that was not a precedent that I needed to be experiencing. It was bad, y'all. And so what happened was, I was on the maximum dose of Vyvanse, and it turned me into an utter zombie around the house. But I was able to get work done, but I was a zombie. All right, so I'd finally reached my point where I'm sitting there thinking about, how can I get hit by a car so I can go to the ER and get some rest? And that's where I knew that it was time to hit the eject button on this career. I didn't care if I was working in a warehouse loading boxes. I needed to get out of there. Fortunately, I'd interviewed for a job back at the original place I was at. which was working in residential, launching a program for kids that were coming out of the highest level juvenile facility and transitioning them back into society, reintegrating them. And so it was kind of I don't know if it's a halfway house, how you would put it, but it was a residential environment where we got kids caught up academically and medically and stuff, and then got them back where we could reintegrate them in society. I got offered that, and I could not take that job fast enough. All right. So I literally escaped that program, that case management, and got back into something I was familiar with, which was running group homes. And I thrived in that position. The only reason that I left that was because the only reason I ended up leaving when I got a chance to run my own shelter program or be the manager of a shelter program. I wasn't the director of it yet. Was because I invested so much of my time into that I knew those kids better than I knew my own. But I was still on the full dosage of my medication, and this is where I was having troubles because I was in a job where I couldn't afford hyper focus, but my medication was allowing me to hyper focus. And so I was more focused on the tasks of getting papers and documentation and stuff. And one of the crazy things was, and ADHDers can attest to this, I got addicted to finding organization systems and trying them out. And I would spend an ungodly amount of time created. The big one that took all my time was the getting things done method, where you have 30 folders, the 30 folders, each folder for a day of the week, and each day of the week you have your tasks that are already organized in there so that you can get them done in time. And then things that are left pending, you have another folder for that. It was a whole lot of other stuff, a whole lot of other moving pieces. And I got obsessed with that method to the point where I wasn't getting any of the other work done because I was spending so much time on the organization system and reading books and learning how to implement it. That is a very ADHD thing. And so it was constantly finding new organization systems and trying to implement them. The Pomodoro technique, this technique, that technique, trying to get things done instead of doing the actual work. So, and so I'm getting back on my thing. And I'm sorry that this is all over the place, but connecting this entire setup really got me distracted. Okay, so we're into why traditional jobs clash with ADHD brains. The sensory overwhelm was something I had to adjust to because the way my office was situated, I was right off the floor, so I could still hear what was going on the floor with the kids, and so there was a difficult time switching tasks between. It was a difficult time switching between monitoring what I'm supposed to be doing and working on my paperwork and supporting my staff. And so there was a constant shift. And it did get overwhelming to a point where I actually had to tell my staff, I need y'all to step up and handle some of this stuff because if I come out, then I'm not going to get the other stuff I need done for the day. And I'm going to be here till midnight every night. Okay? So you guys got to understand, traditional jobs, don't beat yourself up. It's the system. It's not your character. It's just how you fit into that character. So we're going to talk survival strategies because I'm running out of time. So I had to actually learn how to survive with ADHD as a brand new supervisor, working in a brand new program that I had run, working also with. There was a whole backstory about how I ended up becoming the supervisor of this program, and I think backdoor they were trying to push the other supervisor out the door, but they just didn't close the loop and they didn't let me know what the issue was. And so it instantly set up a conflict between me and the supervisor of the program who was on maternity leave. I didn't even know she existed until they mentioned her being on maternity leave. after 3 weeks on the job. So, um, I guess this is just gonna be the test stream, y'all. I'm scattered today, and I apologize. Um, anyway, so what I had to do was I had to redefine success every single day. I had to set my goal for the day, and even if I didn't get anything else done, if I hit that goal, it was a successful day. Okay. Um, One of the things I had to also learn how to do was give myself props because I had one of the toughest milieus of kids because my kids were actually coming from high level detention centers, and my house was quiet. Out of the three programs that we're doing, what we were doing, my house was the quiet house. Because I invested so much time in structuring it, um, and structuring it similar to what I had experienced with when I was working on the regular residential youth care side, that I had a quiet home. And I didn't give myself props for that because I thought that I was a failure in my job because I wasn't able to, I was having trouble with all the tasks that were related to that job. But the outcomes were undeniable. I managed that house and I managed those kids. The thing I needed was a little bit of grace in terms of getting the other tasks done. Because what was happening in the other homes were, um, it was always chaotic. And since I tended to be the supervisor that was there the latest, I ended up putting out fires in the other homes a lot of times. I ended up taking care of stuff that I didn't necessarily, I probably shouldn't have because, the other supervisors, they left on time, which is not negative, but they left when they were supposed to leave. I was there trying to finish up my loose ends and making sure that my house was quiet before I left. So my normal looked different than everybody else's normal. And that was a disconnect. I also didn't necessarily disclose the medications I was on. And so they just thought I was just super intense, and that wasn't the case. I was just, the medications that zoned me in, and I was really trying my best to focus on what I needed to get done. So I had to redefine what my version of normal was. One of the things that did help me out was the Pomodoro technique. I think that's what it's called, where you work in sprints. That did actually help me out. Working in sprints helped me out. Gamifying tasks. I didn't know what that was, but I treated each task that I completed like a small win. Okay. Um, I had anchor tasks. So I would have one or two non-negotiables to complete no matter what. That was when I learned after. That was when I wish I had when I was running my shelter. Body doubling, that's something that's very recent for me. And I didn't realize how important it was until very recently. And that's why I do the body doubling live streams. Because the body doubling live streams, that helps me knock out stuff before the weekend. And so body doubling, for those that don't know, is just having somebody else present while you work. And it can be virtually, it can be in real life. And a lot of times that allows you to focus on, it's almost like having a quiet accountability partner where you can kind of feed off their energy and their presence. And the idea is it allows you to power through difficult tasks. Um, One of the practical moves was requesting accommodations. Now, here's what my issue was. When I requested accommodation, uh, I got pushed back that I was making excuses. When I said, "Hey, they changed my dosage on this medication, and so I need you to look out for these things, so I can be at my best," and they said, "Well, you're making excuses," and that ended up shutting that down. But if you are in a position to request accommodations, please do. For ADHD brains, it can help out so much if people know when you're being sensory overwhelmed and what that looks like and what people can do to help you be your best self. It helps when you have supervisors that are really engaged with bringing out the best in you. Unfortunately, I didn't necessarily run into that until the last job I had before I stepped away from corporate life and started my own business. My last supervisor was amazing. And she was really in tune with what I needed to be successful. And we had some really good success when I was working there just because of that. And even sitting down and writing out short scripts to communicate when I'm overwhelmed, when you're overwhelmed and need a little bit of structuring, where you could kind of sit down and write out and sound out what that conversation sounds like, so that you have it on recall, so that you can kind of put people on and say, hey, this is what it looks like when I am overwhelmed, and these are the things that you can help me. These are the ways that you can help me. Okay. We're going to talk about long term, because this is something I realized really quick into when I was at that case management job. The very first thing is I have to get the hell out of here. I realized that about 6 months into the job, and it was 6 months into the job and about 2 months into the being diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. So this is not an easy conversation to have. I'm be honest with you, because it brings up some pretty dark stuff. And so I'm trying not to ruin everybody's day with oversharing that dark stuff. So there's a part of this I'm probably going to skip. I ended up having to start my exit planning pretty early on. And so when I realized I had to get the hell out of here, that's when I started putting in applications and stuff to other positions and urgently trying to escape this job. That actually ended up becoming a focus in my downtime, was getting out as many job applications out there as possible so I could escape this job, because I knew that this was not somewhere that was going to be healthy for me in the long term. And hindsight being 2020, it absolutely did a lot. I actually did a lot of damage to myself in this position, mentally and physically. Long days without eating, way too much caffeine. When I did eat, it was eating garbage. I ended up giving up my workout routine and sacrificing a lot of other stuff to make that job work. And it started taking a toll on me mentally and emotionally. And it culminated with, after I left that job, 4 or 5 years down the road, it put my marriage in jeopardy, because I was not in, there was a time frame where I was so medicated up that I was an absolute zombie around the house and I had no emotions. And my wife had lost the person that she had married for a while. And it all had to do with my temperament on how I handled things. People thought I was angry all the time, and I was not. I was just gone. Flat affect. Had a hard time. I thought I was fine. And I was like, I have to be on the medication so I can do the job, because I have to keep a roof over my family's head. And instead of tapping out and asking for help or stepping back, because hindsight being 2020, I should have asked the doctor to adjust my meds down. Sorry, I'm answering a message. Guys, I'm sorry, but that's a dark place for me. I can't go into that one. I'm about almost 10 years removed, and it's still really a difficult conversation for me to have about where that one job took me, especially with a brand new ADHD diagnosis. I'll keep it short and sweet. If you're in a job where they're not giving you any accommodations, where you're being told that you're making excuses, where it's impossible, it's not you. You got to get the hell out of there. Sometimes it's finding a new field. Sometimes it's just finding an adjacent job under different management. But I'm not here to tell you that you need to stay at any job that is destroying your mental well-being, because it's not worth it. It's already hard enough to live your life with ADHD, and sometimes it's not worth destroying who you are and your physical and mental well-being to maintain this job. When I was ready to make my exit out of the case management, y'all, I was ready to go work for UPS or something. Like I was that level of gone. Okay? So, look for friendlier ADHD friendlier jobs or environments. A lot of times it does an ADHD friendly environment all comes down to who's supervising you and who you're working with, but also could come down to the tasks. But freelance work, creative roles, tech to a degree, coaching, these are things that allow you that level of freedom where you can kind of give your own task priority and find your own way to work. Because a lot of this, the secret is finding the way that makes sense to you. Because even after I got out of the residential job and went over to managing family support workers, one of the challenges was I was working with supervisors that weren't 100% in line with me finding my own ways to get shit done. That wasn't easy either. A lot of the hacks and stuff that I put together that were super effective, just because I was on a remote office, and in my office nobody's cell phone worked, and so I had to find a messaging app that worked on Wi-Fi, which was a lot harder at the time because we're talking about like 2012, 2011, or 2013 actually. And I got feedback for that because they thought I was trying to have secret conversations with my staff that were off the books. And I'm like, no, it's just the Wi-Fi, the wireless, like nobody's cell phone works in my office, and I need to be able to get text messages from people. But I had supervisors that were literally suspicious of everything that I did. And so that also didn't necessarily help. And one of the things that is crazy is a lot of times when you're dealing with people that aren't really familiar with people that have ADHD, what you run into is the things that you do on a day-to-day basis that make you efficient, they think you're being secretive or manipulative or trying to game the system and stuff. And so I had a boss that was like that. One of my supervisors, she came in about a year on the job. And not only did she not help me develop, she was actively trying to go behind me because she always thought I was lying about stuff. Like when I was out in the field with my staff, she was convinced that I was lying about being out in the field with my staff. When I'm sitting in my office working, she thought I was lying. She would send people down to my office across town to spy on me. She thought I was lying all the time about stuff. And part of it had to do with the fact I had to sit down, finally had to explain to her, my cell phone doesn't work in my office. And so if you're trying to call me on my cell phone, you're not going to get a response because I can't hear it. That's why the staff have to I was using Slack at the time. That's why I have my staff use Slack so that if they have an urgent text message, they can see it and I can see it immediately because I have no mobile signal in my office. So if you want to contact me, call the office phone. But she was really locked in on, and I had already had the 411 on her because I guess I had a friend who had been supervised by her, and she said, be careful, she always is out to try to get you. And I didn't know what he meant until I started working with her. But she thought I was lying all the time because I work differently, and I was able to create outcomes that she didn't think I should be able to create. That is one of the challenges. I don't know if there's any words for it. I don't know if anybody else with ADHD has ever experienced this. And I know this is supposed to be a two-way conversation, but it really is a one-way conversation at this point. I don't know if anybody with ADHD has actually ever experienced this, y'all. Ooh, I do have a comment. What up? So has anybody who has ADHD experienced this in a job where your supervisor doesn't trust you just based on weird shit about how your mind functions? Like, because you function a little bit differently, you communicate a little bit differently, you have different needs where they do not trust you. Has anybody experienced that? I feel like I have. And I could not quite put my thumb on it when I was working with her. But the level of distrust was insane, to the point where when my mom, that's another one. When my mom got sick, it was in the hospital for the first time. I called around. I could not reach my supervisor. I reached out to all my staff and said, "Hey, I'm at university. This is another dead zone in the city. Use Slack if you want to communicate with me so I can respond immediately to you. But if I don't answer, I'm not ignoring you. I just don't have a cell phone signal." I had written up. I called and left a message on my supervisor and say, "Hey, my mom's in the ER." And I'm sitting up here with her. And she tried to say that she never got that call. But then we pulled the call logs, and she absolutely did get the call. But I got written up for being in the hospital with my mom when she was sick. And at the time, she was dying, and I didn't know. I got written up for that. This was the time where I had a change in supervisors. So the new supervisor came in, and initially she was going to enforce the write-up. And I told them straight up, like, I'm not signing that shit. I was in the hospital with my mom, and I'm not going to say her name, but she's trying to say I'm lying about it. I pulled all the call logs and showed exactly when I had called. Another time, I had a vacation request literally approved by her, and she said I had no called, no showed on that day, and I had to actually go back and pull up the email because I don't know if she deleted the calendar thing or didn't mark it on her calendar, but long story short, it was a weird level of distrust, and a lot of it had to do with how I communicated. I don't know. I really don't. I truly don't understand what happened, where the disconnect was. But when I switched supervisors, the new supervisor kind of looked and she said, that's kind of bullshit. And she's like, I'm not going to enforce that, what she put in place, because that write-up wasn't right. The reason why I left that place I was at for almost 20 years was when I was working there, and I'm off script, but I'm going to jump back on script. When I was working there, I was helping out in training. I spent a lot of time in the training department. That's where I actually wanted to be. I was helping out with training classes. I was helping revise. I was on a couple of work groups to revise the current training that they were providing to the staff about behavioral management and a lot of other things. And so I was always in contact with the guy who was the head of the master's degree program. And he wanted me in that program bad. Like he saw potential. He wanted me, and it would have been my master's in clinical counseling. And so I had gone through all the hoops, everything I needed to do. And my supervisor stepped to me, and her supervisor stepped to me, and they said, "Well, you're kind of low on staff. We figured you could help out. Your leadership can help out managing families in Iowa, which is right next door." And basically, it was taking me from being a supervisor to a frontline worker again. And so I said, I'll do this if you guys will sign off on me getting my master's. And they're like, 100%, this is the kind of leadership we're looking for, step up. So I did it. Without resources. I didn't have a phone that worked. Sometimes the families didn't even know who I was. I had one case where they wanted me to pick up this 3-year-old. They didn't prompt anybody about who I was and where I was coming from. And I had this 3-year-old screaming and yelling. And they were like, well, why didn't you just make the 3-year-old get in your car? I'm like, I am not going to be the big black dude out in the middle of the sticks in Iowa putting a screaming white toddler into my car against their will. Are you insane? They would give me the wrong city. Like sometimes they would give me addresses that weren't even in the right city. Like it was a disaster. And I could see why they needed help because they were spread so thin over there that they couldn't effectively communicate anything. But I did it. I did my time over there. And when it was done, I had filled out my letter, done all my stuff, and got all my paperwork together to submit to be enrolled in that master's program. And it would have been, I got the full ride scholarship and everything. I take it to my supervisor and her supervisor, and they want to have a full-blown meeting. And so they sat me down and said, well, your mom is sick now, and so we don't think that's a good time for you to go pursue your master's degree. You need to focus on taking care of your mom. And I said, that master's degree is the only thing she wanted to see me do before she passed. And I said, so what am I supposed to do? Well, you can get into the next cohort. I said, next cohort doesn't start for another 2 years. Well, I mean, we'll endorse you the next time it comes around. And I'm like, and in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to be here in 2 years. I'm not going to be here in 6 months. That was the end of my journey there. And I ended up leaving that job. And I actually ended up stumbling into a job with an amazing supervisor. Lisa was this was working at the Child Saving Institute. Lisa was an amazing supervisor. Really emphasized on making sure I had what I needed to be successful and letting me work and let me do the things I needed to do. It was a great union. The only thing that separated me from that was when my mom passed, and I didn't have it in me to do childcare anymore. But that was when that was the job where I ended up becoming the director of a residential program. Like, that was my director level job. Okay, so I've kind of rambled on a couple of different things. Let's wrap this up. I'm probably gonna have to redo this one. I'm gonna be honest with you, because I'm not necessarily happy how this is going. Okay. So you come up with your exit strategy if you're in a position where it's untenable. Okay. It's not about just surviving. It's about making it temporary. Okay. Understand that this job is just a way station, a blip on the roadmap. Okay. If you got any questions or see this after the fact, or you can power through a lot of my rambling and disjointedness, like I said, I'm scattered today because of setting up this thing. And ADHDers know when you're setting up things, and if it doesn't go right, you can get scattered really easily. Okay, so we're wrapping this thing up because I gotta run my baby girl to practice here. Okay, it's not about surviving; it's about making sure that this is understanding that what you're up against is temporary. If you have questions or anything, drop them in the chat. My goal is to be a resource for ADHD brains. I'm going to be back on here tomorrow with the Trial and Error podcast with me and Fearless. I'm not sure what we're discussing. I got to go back and look at my notes, but I'll be back on live tomorrow. Like I said, guys, I'm here as a coach or a mentor or whatever, a resource. If you need help and you find yourself stuck in a process or stuck in a position or stuck with a decision, that's what the Unstuck sessions is for. It's a place where I can help guide you through that using some structured problem solving and coach you through it, being your biggest cheerleader. So if you're interested, leave a comment and I will reply. Actually, I'll just drop my emails in the comments so that you can see them. But that's what I have today. I'm going to redo this one, y'all. This was my test live stream, and some of these are only getting like 30 minutes, bro. It was bad. I apologize if it's disjointed, y'all. But this is my first time using this platform. I'll probably be back on StreamYard until I could figure this one out 100%. Thank you for tuning in. I got to get running here. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a great week. Oh, I'll be back on Friday. I'll be back on Friday for the body doubling session. On Friday, I do a co-working session where I want you to bring your tasks and stuff, and we can get work done together before the weekend. It's body doubling. Basically, the concept is having another person present while you're trying to power through difficult work or things that require a lot of willpower. And basically, having somebody else present, you can kind of draw from their willpower and stay focused on it. So that's what that's about. And I do that Friday at 11:30, around noon-ish. So I'll be back with that. And that's the body doubling live stream. So that's what I got for y'all. I appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in with me on this new one, on this new adventure. I'm going to figure out this new platform, and hopefully it's not going to be such a mess next time. But I appreciate y'all. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.